the dead stillness of a winter night on the frontier, when even the coyotes stayed quiet, a little girl named Mara did something no one in the town of Dry Creek expected. While most folks were huddled near their stoves, she stepped out into the snow with nothing but a lantern, a thin coat, and a heart far braver than her size suggested. She heard a sound that didn't belong to the cold. Two foals, barely a week old, shivering and stumbling at the edge of her family's ranch. Any adult would have said it was hopeless, but Mara, she simply whispered, "I'll get you warm," and dragged them inside before the storm crushed them. But by sunrise, the peaceful ranch was gone. Deputies circled the house. A marshal was shouting orders, and Mara's mother stood frozen at the window, whispering, "Why are they here? What did she bring home?" Because those foals weren't lost. They were wanted, and someone dangerous wanted them back. This is a story from WesTtalesas down, and it'll take you deep into the quiet bravery and hidden dangers of the Old West. If you love gripping, heartfelt Western stories filled with real frontier courage, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who enjoys a good tale by the fire. Your support helps keep these stories riding strong across the frontier. The wind had a way of speaking on the western frontier. Some nights it murmured, brushing gently over the sagebrush. But on this night, it roared, carrying icy shards across the Dry Creek Valley. Most folks stayed inside, doors bolted, lamps low, hands wrapped around tin mugs of coffee. It was the kind of night where even a seasoned rancher would think twice before stepping outside. But 11-year-old Mara Whitlock wasn't most folks. She lay awake in her small room under the slanted loft roof, listening to the groaning of the house as the storm pushed against it. The old boards creaked, the window panes rattled. Her parents were asleep, exhausted from a long day tending to the cattle, who were penned tightly in the barn to escape the cold. But Mara couldn't shake the feeling that something outside wasn't right. At first, she thought she imagined it, a faint cry, barely a sound at all, just a thin, broken noise carried past her window by the wind. She sat up, blinking into the dark. There it was again, a whimper, high, weak, strained, almost like a baby horse. She slipped out from beneath the quilt, her boots clutched in one hand, coat in the other. The floor was freezing, but her worry drowned out the bite of the boards. She glanced toward her parents' door. They'd worry if she woke them, and if she didn't go outside to check. She knew she wouldn't sleep anyway. Something alive was hurting out there. She eased out the back door, lantern in hand. The flame shivered in the glass, but it stayed lit as she stepped into the storm. Snowflakes slapped her cheeks like cold needles. The wind pulled at her hair, as if trying to send her back inside, but she pressed forward, guided only by instinct and the faint, desperate sound. The ranch stretched wide behind the house, a barn, a chicken coop, a line of fence disappearing into the night. Beyond that, open land, the kind of land where anything could be hiding. But Mara didn't hesitate. She trudged through the deepening snow, boots sinking, breath fogging in the air. Then she saw them. Two small shapes collapsed beside a juniper tree, barely visible under the swirl of white. She gasped and ran toward them, lantern held out like a lifeline. Two Foals, tiny, shivering violently, their coats crusted with frost. They couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 days old, too young to weather a night like this. And alone, no mare in sight. That didn't make sense. Wild horses were protective. A mother would defend her foals until her legs gave out. So where was she? Why were they abandoned? Mara crouched beside them. One foal tried to lift its head but collapsed again, wheezing. The other didn't move at all except for a faint twitch in its ear. "You're freezing," she whispered, lowering the lantern to get a better look. "You poor things." Logic Sage should go back to the house and wake her father. He'd know what to do. He always did. But logic didn't feel fast enough. Not tonight. Not with these foals fading right in front of her. She made the decision the way kids sometimes do on the frontier. Not because it was sensible, but because it was right. She shrugged off her coat and wrapped it around the weaker foal, lifting its head into her arms. It was heavier than she expected, limp and cold. She stood slowly, wobbling under the weight, and motioned to the other one. "Come on," she urged softly, nudging it with her boot. "You gotta try." The second foal staggered to its hoofs, trembling but responsive. It followed her, stumbling through the snow as she half carried, half dragged the first one back toward the house. The lantern swayed in her hand, lighting just enough path for them to move. By the time she reached the back door, her arms were numb. Her fingers felt like brittle twigs. Her face was raw from the wind, but she'd brought them home. Inside, the warm air hit her like a wave. She shut the door quickly, easing the small body in her arms onto the braided rug near the stove. She coaxed the other foal inside and shut the door behind it. Her heart hammered. She knew she'd have to explain all this to her parents. Knew she'd probably be in trouble for going out alone. But when she saw the way the foals collapsed near the heat, she didn't regret a thing. She piled blankets over them. She rubbed their necks to bring warmth back into their bodies. She whispered to them the way her father whispered to frightened colts at branding time. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." One of the foals stirred, breathing a little stronger. The other blinked, its eyes unfocusing and refocusing like it wasn't sure where it was. Then, a sound from behind her. "Mara." What in heaven's name? She turned to see her mother standing in the kitchen doorway, her nightgown lit by the stove's glow. Her expression was a mix of shock, confusion, and the kind of fear only parents know. Mara swallowed hard. "I heard them crying. They would have died if I left them."
Her mother stared at the foals, expression softening just a little. Then she motioned sharply. "Go wake your father." A few minutes later, the entire Whitlock household was fully awake. Her father knelt beside the foals, checking their breathing, feeling their legs brushing frost from their coats. "Mara," he said finally, "these aren't wild-born." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look here." He pointed at the base of one foal's neck. Under the damp fur, the faint outline of a brand was visible. Not the shape of any ranch mark Mara recognized. A circle. A bar. A double slash. Her mother drew in a breath. "That's not from around here." "No," her father agreed. "And whoever put this mark on them, they're going to want them back." For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, listening to the wind outside as if it carried an answer. But none came. Just the foals breathing. Just the storm dying down. Just the quiet, fragile peace of a warm ranch house on a cold night. And then morning arrived. Mara woke to her mother shaking her shoulder hard. "Get up. Now." Her mother's voice wasn't angry or frightened. It was something else. Something urgent. Mara stumbled out of bed and moved to the window. And her heart stopped. Deputies. At least 8 of them. Horses tied to the fence. Lanterns still lit. Rifles slung across cold shoulders. A U.S. Marshal's badge catching the pale morning sun. They had surrounded the house. Her mother whispered, "Mara, what did you bring home?" She didn't have an answer. But whatever the truth was, someone believed those foals were worth sending the law after. And that meant they weren't just lost. They were evidence. They were a warning. They were a secret. And that secret had arrived with them on her family's doorstep. Morning on the frontier usually brought calm. A slow thaw. The smell of coffee drifting through ranch houses. The creak of saddle leather as ranch hands started their day. But on this morning, calm was the last thing Dry Creek offered. Mara stood barefoot on the wooden floor, staring through the frost-lined window as a full circle of deputies formed around her home. It looked unreal, like something out of the stories old-timers told when they wanted to spook kids into behaving. But this wasn't a story. This was real. Boots crunching in snow. Steam rising from horses' backs. a hard-faced marshal at the front of the line, staring straight at her family's porch. Her father, John Whitlock, didn't waste time. He stepped into his boots, grabbed his coat, and marched toward the door. Her mother followed close behind, hair pinned back quick and tight, jaw set. Mara trailed them, her pulse thumping like a hammer. When her father opened the door, the cold slapped inside. The marshal didn't bother waiting for an invitation. "John Whitlock," he called. His voice carried clean across the yard despite the bitter chill. "We're coming in." Her father squared his shoulders. "This is my property. You knock and you ask." A deputy stepped forward, one hand on his rifle. "This is federal business. Don't make this difficult." Mara looked up at her father. She could see something shift in his expression, not exactly fear, not quite defiance. More like a calculation. He'd been a rancher his whole life, but before that, he'd lived a different kind of life. A rougher one. A life where you didn't bow to threats just because someone wore a badge. The marshal stepped ahead of his men, raising a hand to settle them. "We're not here to start a fight," he said, tone cooler now. "But I need to speak with you. And I need to see what you brought into this house last night." Her mother stiffened beside him. "Our daughter rescued 2 newborn foals. That's all." The marshal exchanged a glance with one of the deputies. A quiet signal passed between them. "That's exactly why we're here." Her father hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Leave your firearms outside. All of you." A ripple of surprise moved through the deputies, but the marshal nodded and unslung his rifle, leaning it against a post. One by one, the men followed suit. The cold wind tugged at their coats as they stripped themselves of weapons, more uneasy than they wanted to show. Inside, the heat from the stove hit them immediately. The foals were wrapped in quilts, their little bodies still trembling but alive. Mara hurried to sit between them, protective, tense. The marshal's eyes softened when he saw the foals. Not pity. Recognition. He crouched beside them, brushing frost from one foal's forehead. Then he pulled back the blanket to expose the faint brand on its neck. The strange symbol seemed to darken as the warmth reached it, a circle with a bar and 2 slashes. Her mother folded her arms. "You want to tell us what that means?" The marshal rose slowly. "The mark belongs to a group that's been hitting ranches all across the territory. Rustlers. Horse thieves with an appetite for violence." Her father frowned. "Rustlers branding newborns? That's not normal." "It's not," the marshal agreed. "This isn't for ownership. It's for identification. These foals are bloodline stock." Mara blinked. "What does that mean?" The marshal didn't answer immediately. He paced once near the stove, running a hand through his beard as though choosing his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "They're breeding horses for a job. A profitable one. Fast, agile stock that can handle harsh terrain. Those 2 foals are part of a program they stole from a government breeder down in Red Bluff. The thieves want them back. And they'll kill to get them." Mara swallowed hard. Her mother rested a protective hand on her shoulder. John Whitlock stepped forward. "If that's true, why bring lawmen to my house first? Shouldn't you be chasing the rustlers?" The marshal's jaw tightened. "We are. But at dawn, we got word from a trapper passing through this valley. Said he saw movement near your ranch in the storm. A small mare collapsed from a gunshot wound about a mile west." Mara felt her heart cave in. "The mother?" she whispered. The marshal nodded. "We believe so. The thieves were moving the herd through this county. Something happened in the storm. The mare broke away with her foals. They chased her, shot her, and kept going. They probably didn't realize the foals slipped away in the snow." Mara couldn't breathe for a second. She imagined the mare running through the storm, desperate to protect her babies. Dying alone in the cold. Leaving those 2 tiny lives to chance. Leaving them for her to find. Her mother wiped a hand across her mouth, stunned. "So you're here to take them?" "Ma'am," the marshal said, "I'm here to keep your family alive. If the rustlers find out where the foals ended up, they'll come. They'll assume you stole them. And they won't negotiate. John Whitlock didn't flinch. My family's not running from criminals. My daughter saved these animals. They stay until they're strong. Respect flickered in the marshal's eyes, but concern overshadowed it. You don't understand what you're up against. These aren't drifters. They're organized. Armed. They've killed lawmen. They've burned ranches. Her father didn't back down. Then you'd better tell me everything. Because I won't hand over these foals until I know exactly who they belong to and why they're so valuable. The marshal exhaled. A long, tired breath. There's something else. Something we didn't broadcast across the territory. Her mother tensed. Say it. The marshal glanced again at the foals, then lowered his voice. These two aren't just any foals. They're part of a controlled breeding experiment. Designed for endurance, intelligence, and speed. The type of horses law enforcement across the frontier has been trying to develop for years. Her father raised a brow. I've heard rumors. Didn't think they were true. They're very true, the marshal said. And the rustlers know what they stole. They plan to raise them into the fastest courier horses in the West. Horses that can outrun us. Outsmart us. Maybe even outrun the army. Silence filled the room like cold water. Mara's voice trembled. So they're special. The marshal nodded. Special enough that a gang's survival depends on them. And now that gang is missing two of their most valuable assets. Mara looked down at the foals. One lifted its head weakly and nudged her arm. Its breath was warmer now. Softer. Like it trusted her. Her chest tightened. They're just babies. That's exactly why you need to let us take them to a secure facility, the marshal replied. Before anyone else shows up here. Her father shook his head immediately. They won't survive transport. They need steady heat, milk, care. You move them today and you'll kill them. The marshal hesitated. I don't want that. But you do want to take them, her mother said. For their protection. And yours. Her father stepped between the marshal and the foals. They're not leaving this house until they're healthy. But you can help us protect them while they're here. It was the boldest offer he could make. And also the most dangerous. The marshal weighed the words, gaze sweeping the house again. Outside, the deputies shifted restlessly. A couple looked toward the tree line as if expecting trouble. The air had that feeling. Heavy. Waiting. Finally, the marshal nodded. Fine. We'll set up a perimeter. We'll keep the place guarded for 24 hours. Her mother frowned. Only 24? That's how long you've got before the rustlers realize what they lost, and where they lost it. Because we found tracks leading straight toward your land. Mara's breath caught. Her father stiffened. Her mother glanced at the door as though expecting someone to burst through it. The marshal continued, voice grim. They're coming. And when they do, you'll want every man I brought today. Mara looked at the foals again. She didn't know how, or why, or what fate had planned for them. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Last night, she brought home 2 freezing newborns. This morning, she discovered she had brought home a war. The day settled into a tense, unnatural quiet. Deputies paced the perimeter with rifles slung low, eyes flicking toward the distant ridgelines. The marshal stayed close to the barn, speaking in low tones to her father, the 2 men exchanging information like old war dogs trading scars. But inside the Whitlock home, the air was thick with something else entirely, dread mixed with an aching curiosity. Because the question Mara couldn't escape, no matter how many times she stroked the foals' manes, was simple. Who did these foals really belong to? And what kind of men would kill for them? As the sun crawled higher, thawing the frost on the windows, her father finally returned to the living room. He crouched beside the foals again, brushing their coats with a gentle hand. He'd spent years calming skittish animals, and even now, in a situation that could spiral into gunfire at any moment, that same calm lived in his fingers. Mara sat on her knees next to him. Daddy, she said quietly, what do you think happened to their herd? He didn't answer at first. He just stared at the faint brand under the foal's fur. That strange mark seemed heavier now, as if it carried more than ink and iron, as if it carried a story. Finally, he said, "It wasn't wolves. And it wasn't an accident." Her mother, standing near the stove, folded her arms. "Meaning what?" "The mare was shot. Which means the herd was under fire. Probably to scatter them. That's a classic rustler tactic." He paused. "But this brand, this isn't a ranch brand. It's a marker. Almost like a signature." Mara tilted her head. "Whose signature?" Before he could answer, the marshal stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He shut the door firmly behind him, as if the cold wasn't the only thing he wanted to keep out. "You want the truth?" he asked, turning toward them. "All right. You deserve to know exactly what you're dealing with." Her parents exchanged a glance. Mara shifted closer to the Foals, protective without even realizing it. The marshal sat on the edge of a chair, elbows on his knees. "The brand isn't from a ranch. It's from a group calling themselves the Crossbar Syndicate." Her mother frowned. "Doesn't sound familiar." "It wouldn't," the marshal replied. "They're not loud. They're not sloppy. They don't rob banks with masks or ride through towns firing shots in the air. Their work is quieter. Cleaner." Her father nodded bleakly. "Smarter." The marshal gave a slow nod. "Over the last 3 years, they've been stealing select horses across 3 states. Not large herds, just breeding stock. They've targeted animals with strong bloodlines, good stamina, good minds. Horses that could sire the best working stock in the West." Mara ran her hand down the foal's neck. "So they're building their own herd." "Not just any herd," the marshal said. "A superior line. Something the government's been trying to build for years, but with strict supervision and controlled breeding. The syndicate is copying the program, or worse, they stole the program outright." Her mother stiffened. "You said something about government involvement before. What does that mean?" The marshal's expression darkened. "The U.S. Marshal Service and the Army Quartermaster Corps have been running an experiment in Red Bluff. Trying to breed horses capable of long-distance travel with little water. The type that could carry urgent dispatches across dangerous terrain without slowing. Horses with the speed of mustangs and the stamina of desert stock." Her father let out a low whistle. "Couriers." "Exactly." The marshal leaned back, boots scraping the floor. "Imagine having the fastest horses in the West. Faster than any army mount. Faster than any lawman could chase. You'd hold the advantage in every territory. That's what the Crossbar Syndicate wants." Mara had heard adults talk about outlaws before, bank robbers, brawlers, thieves who stumbled through life causing trouble. But what the marshal was describing, it wasn't disorganized crime. It was something colder. Strategic. Ruthless. "Why brand babies?" Mara asked. The marshal pointed to the mark again. "Because they're tracking lineage. That symbol means these 2 foals come from the prime line, the best the program produced. If raised right, these 2 would grow into horses with unbelievable endurance." Her mother rested a hand on Mara's shoulder. "And now the syndicate knows they're missing." The marshal didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes, ma'am. And if they find their trail leading here, they'll come for them." Her father stood, jaw firm. "Then tell us everything you know about these men." The marshal nodded once. "The syndicate is led by a man named Calder Rusk." Her mother's eyes widened. "I've heard that name." Mara looked between them. "Who is he?" Her father exhaled through his nose, thinking hard. "Rusk used to be a ranch hand up north. Heard he was smart, quiet. Too quiet. Folks said he could break a horse in half the time it took the best wranglers. Could read an animal better than any trainer alive." He paused. "Then he disappeared." "He didn't disappear," the marshal said. "He transformed. Built himself a criminal outfit made of former ranch hands and drovers who knew horseflesh. Men who could ride better than most lawmen. Men who never talked. Men who followed orders without hesitation." "And now he's breeding horses?" her mother asked. "For years now," the marshal replied. He stole a handful of the first experiment line from a government transport convoy, killed 2 handlers, vanished into the mountains, been growing his operation ever since. Her father crossed his arms. But why the mare? Why shoot her? She wasn't shot to kill, the marshal said. She was shot to stop. To stop her from running off. They didn't want to kill her, they needed her alive for more breeding. The storm probably confused her. She ran too far. And the foals ran with her. Mara looked down. Her throat tightened. The idea of the mare dying alone out in the cold was harder to bear now that she understood why. They were chasing her, Mara whispered. She ran trying to save her babies. The marshal nodded. She bought them enough time for you to find them. Her parents exchanged a long, heavy glance. A silent conversation full of worry. Her father asked, "How close is this syndicate?" "We don't know. Could be hours. Could be less." Her mother's hand trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "And you really think they'd attack a family over 2 foals?" The marshal's voice was flat. "I think they already have." Everyone went still. The marshal continued quietly. "The mare was found with fresh tracks around her. Not horse tracks. Boot prints. At least 3 men. They were searching for the foals. The storm slowed them down. But storms end." Mara felt something deep in her stomach tighten. The kind of fear that didn't come from imagination, but from knowing someone dangerous was already on their land. Her father turned toward the window. "If they come here, we'll fight." The marshal didn't smile. "You're a brave man, John. But understand this, Calder Rusk doesn't fight fair. He fights to finish." Mara stroked the foal again. Its tiny body pressed into her hand. Its breath warmed her wrist. It trusted her completely now. And that trust felt like a weight. A responsibility. Her mother finally spoke. "Marshal, what's your plan?" "We hold this property," he said. "We arm every man. We watch the ridgelines. And we pray the syndicate comes at us straight forward instead of slipping through the trees." Her father nodded once. "Then that's what we'll do." The marshal moved toward the door, pausing only when he reached the frame. "We have one advantage," he added. "Rusk doesn't know your daughter found the foals. He doesn't know they're alive." Mara looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" The marshal turned his head slightly. "It means he's desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. But they're also predictable." Her father's brow creased. "Meaning?" The marshal's voice dropped to a low, grim certainty. "If Calder Rusk believes the foals died in the storm, he'll move on. But the moment he sees signs they survived," he glanced toward the foals, "he'll come for them. Hard. Fast. And without mercy." The room felt colder than the wind outside. Mara swallowed, placing both hands gently on the foals' backs. "Then we keep them quiet," her father said. "Quiet won't be enough," the marshal replied. "Then we keep them alive," Mara whispered. The marshal's gaze softened for the first time. "That," he said, "is the one thing we must do." A hard wind swept across Black Basin when the sun dropped behind the jagged mesas, casting the desert in a copper glow that felt almost supernatural. Folks in the town of Dustwell always said evening winds carried memories out here, whispering old stories if you listened long enough. But tonight, the wind carried something else, the unmistakable echo of hoofbeats. Slow, steady, deliberate. The kind that made shutters close, lamps dim, and hearts tighten. Because those hoofbeats belonged to a man believed dead. 12 years had passed since Colt Maddox rode into the Salt Mire with a price on his head and a bullet in his ribs. No man survived that stretch of desert. Men vanished there like dreams at sunrise. But Dustwell, a place starved of miracles, was about to witness one. Sheriff Arden Briggs stood alone outside his office, hand resting on his worn Colt navy. His iron-gray mustache twitched when he heard the hoofbeats. Not fear. Recognition. Because only one horse in this region moved with that heavy, sorrowful rhythm. A coal-black stallion named Ember. The stallion stepped out of the shadows first, eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. Then the rider appeared. Tall, lean, dust-worn, hat pulled low, coat torn at the edges like it had survived a storm of claws, and a face half hidden behind a thick layer of trailed dust. But even then, the sheriff recognized him. "Colt Maddox," Briggs whispered. "In the flesh. Or ghost of him." Colt dismounted without a word, boots touching the ground like he wasn't fully sure it was real. His eyes, cold blue and hollowed from years of wandering, scanned the town like he expected it to disappear if he blinked. People peeked through cracks in curtains, whispering his name like an outlaw prayer. Kids who'd grown up hearing stories about him gasped. Old gamblers crossed themselves. Every soul felt the same thing: a reckoning had arrived. Colt walked toward the sheriff, stopping only a few feet away. Silence clung to the air. "You look like hell," Briggs muttered. "I'd been there," Colt replied in a low, gravel-laced voice. "Walked a long road back." "What brings you?" "A promise," Colt said. "One I made a lifetime ago." Briggs stiffened. He knew exactly what promise Colt meant. 12 years earlier, Colt had ridden into the Salt Mire not because he was running from the law, but because he was running toward justice. His younger brother, Jesse Maddox, was murdered by a rustler crew known as the Hollow Creek Gang. Everyone believed Colt died hunting them. But now here he stood. Alive. Different. Changed in a way that made the sheriff uneasy. Colt took a slow breath. "Need a room? Need a bath? Need answers?" Briggs nodded slowly. "Dustwell changed since you left." "Everything changes," Colt murmured. "Even the dead." He walked toward the saloon, boots scraping the dirt like a slow drumbeat. Folks parted as he passed, eyes wide, body stiff. He didn't look at anyone. Didn't speak. Just kept walking with that haunted, carved-from-stone expression. Inside Last Lantern Saloon, chatter died the moment Colt stepped through the swinging doors. The player piano sputtered out its tune like it knew who had arrived. The bartender froze mid-wipe on a whiskey glass. Colt removed his hat, gaze drifting across the room until it landed on a woman sitting near the back. Hazel hair. Steel-gray eyes. A face that once meant home to him. Lorna Hale. His childhood friend. Sheriff Briggs's niece. The only person who ever understood the shadows inside him. She stood slowly, disbelief turning into something deeper. "Colt?" she whispered. He nodded. She walked to him, each step trembling. When she reached him, she lifted her hand, hesitated, then touched his cheek gently. Her fingers shook. "You're real," she breathed. "Thought I'd never see you again." "Didn't think I'd see anything again," Colt said softly. "What happened out there?" she asked. "Everyone said you died in Salt Mire." "I did," Colt answered. "Just didn't stay that way." The room tensed. Lorna searched his face. "You're scaring people." "What do you mean?" Colt exhaled, voice low. "Hollow Creek didn't kill me. Desert didn't kill me. But something did. Or tried to. Took everything I was. Took every memory except one. Jesse screaming. And fire. Lots of fire." Lorna felt fear creep up her spine. Colt wasn't a man who talked about fear, pain, or ghosts. But right now he looked like someone stitched together by will alone. A man fighting something inside him. Before she could speak again, the saloon doors slammed open. A group of 5 rough-looking riders marched in, spurs clinking. Dust-smeared coats. Eyes mean. Horses branded with a familiar sigil, a Hollow Creek bed. The Hollow Creek Gang. Colt's jaw tightened, the air around him shifting like a loaded gun cocking. Their leader, a tall brute with a scar running from temple to chin, spit tobacco juice on the floor. His grin was all venom. "Well, I'll be damned," he drawled. "Town says a dead man walked in. Guess rumors ain't rumors no more." Colt stepped forward. Ember's hoofbeats had been calm. Colt's own heartbeat was not. "You killed my brother," Colt said quietly. The outlaw laughed. "Killed lots of folks. Need names. Colt lifted his head fully. His eyes were blazing, hollow yet burning. Only one name matters. Tension snapped through the room like barbed wire tightening. Everyone stepped back. The outlaw leader reached for his gun. But Colt was faster. Not just fast. Unnaturally fast. A single movement. A blur. A flash of steel. The outlaw froze, fingers inches from his holster, staring at Colt's revolver pointed at his skull. No one saw Colt draw. Not a soul. Whispers rippled. Men crossed themselves again. Y'all hear that? Colt asked calmly. That's the sound of justice catching up. The outlaw swallowed. You ain't human. Colt didn't blink. Maybe not anymore. Lorna stared at him with fear and awe tangled together. Sheriff Briggs burst through the saloon doors, rifle ready. Stand down! Colt didn't move. The room held its breath. Finally, he lowered his gun. For now, Colt said. The outlaws backed away, rattled, shaken by a man who seemed carved from the afterlife itself. Sheriff Briggs stepped up. You bringing trouble, Maddox? Colt's expression hardened. I'm ending trouble. And after that? The sheriff asked. Colt glanced around the room, at the fearful faces, at Lorna's trembling hands, at the shadows gathering like old memories rising. I ain't done walking, he murmured. Not till every ghost is laid to rest. Outside, the wind howled through the basin again. This time, it wasn't carrying memories. It was carrying a warning. And Dustwell braced for the storm Colt Maddox had brought home.